NDIS is always a topic of conversation in this country, and rarely is it because people actually care about supporting Australians in need. Usually it's spoken about because it's a really good way to hit some political talking points. Thankfully, a long-awaited, totally genuine video about NDIS fraud has finally hit the timeline, spearheaded by two individuals who definitely care about genuinely supporting Australians in need, and for sure don't just want attention. 50% of this train wreck is Drew Pavlou, an Australian political lolcow and purported defender of Australians in need.
I think they screamed the R word, you know, the slur about disabilities. They screamed that at us. They was literally screaming slurs at us. So it's just a good question. I mean, do you want these people to be basically involved in disability provision care in Australia when they're literally hurling slurs around, assaulting people?
He's tweeted that slur so many times, the scroller disappeared at one point, by the way. The other 50% of this miserable attempt at investigative journalism is PeteZz, or however you say his name, a YouTuber who makes algo bait I had never heard of before and hopefully will never hear from again. Motivation-wise, it seems like this NDIS video was a horrific attempt to mimic that investigative journalistic failure that was Nick Shirley's Minnesota fraud video, a video that was one of the preceding events that led to ICE charging into Minneapolis and killing American civilians. Look, if the goal was to create a video as factually devoid as Nick Shirley's video, these boys have actually done an incredible job. This video feels like they just threw statements at the wall and hoped a few of them would stick. Some statements are just factually incorrect. Some statements they make me think they have no understanding of how simple aspects of the NDIS actually work, and overall they just behave in a way that no self-respecting investigative journalist or self-respecting person would. With over 1.5 million views on Elon Musk's hug box, over 200,000 on YouTube, mainstream media hooking onto the story, and even politicians bringing up this video, I think the damage is done. But I at least feel better knowing there is one video on this site that at least tries to give you the honest truth about the NDIS. But hey, as always, if you enjoy the video, like, subscribe, let me know anything in the comments. Let's get into it. The primary reason you should care about NDIS participants being victims of fraud is that it's morally reprehensible, that these are some of our most vulnerable Aussies who need our support, and a society who lets these people get taken advantage of is a horrific society that we need to fix. Whilst the financial aspect of NDIS fraud should be secondary to that doesn't mean it's not important. I agree that it's important to stop fraud wherever possible. Obviously, money stolen is money that can't be used to help people who genuinely need it. I get there's going to be uncomfortable and combative moments when you're trying to document fraud. I am aware that this is going to be a controversial thing. But if there is one critique that I really want to stick with you, it's that in the process of trying to uncover this fraud, both Drew and Pete negligently put children in a position where not only are they seemingly afraid
for some services, if that's fine,
but these two disgusting opportunists forgot to blur their faces. Irrelevant of whether that business was allegedly committing fraud, it should not be the case that children get caught in the crossfire of your expose moment. And if they are going to get caught in the crossfire, which is pretty unacceptable, do the bare minimum and make sure you have properly blurred their faces. There are clips that I will not be showing in this video that seem like a child is blocking his ears, clearly dysregulated. Now, in that particular bit of footage, thankfully, the business they are investigating is targeted more towards the elderly. So there is a relatively low chance that what Pete and Drew have negligently done is accidentally out a child as having a potentially private disability. But there is no indication that Drew or Pete knew that before going to this business. So I'm not sure if that level of generosity should be afforded to them. And even still, we have no idea if those children are the grandchildren of NDIS participants who are seeking support in that business. And Drew and Pete might have inadvertently and negligently outed them as accessing a private support service if someone recognizes those children. And if we take a step back from the NDIS component for a second, I think it's pretty disgusting and morally reprehensible to film children clearly distressed, forget to blur them, and then profit off it. We're not talking about the blur messing up for a frame or two. We're talking about entire shots where there is no blur at all. There's a lot more to unpack and criticize in this video because it is a dumpster fire. But if you want one clear symbol and example of why these two are not remotely responsible or mature enough to do this style of content, it should be this still of Drew's smug grin as he walks away from a child they've both just dysregulated. And don't get me wrong, let's be very clear, the workers were horrible in my opinion. They're screaming louder, they're breaking stuff, but let's also be clear that this would not have happened if Drew and Pete had not showed up to Content Farm. Drew and Pete were ultimately the ones who had the responsibility to ensure that vulnerable people, whether that be children or NDIS participants, were not caught in the crossfire of their expose. And in this instant, not only did they fail to do that in the moment, they failed to protect people in the edit as well. I let them know about this failure to blur the kids' faces days before making this video, by the way. I did what I could. I wasn't trying to do some content ambush. Hopefully, they fix it if they see this video. But I'm going to be honest, my hopes aren't high. There are a lot of moments in this video where you really start to doubt if there was any genuine attempt to frame things honestly. Obviously, fraud in the NDIS exists. That's a known fact, and absolutely something that needs to be dealt with. But they're just wrong about the publicly stated figures. It's just not as high as they claim in their video.
Crazy part is there's 751,000 NDIS participants, and if we just put a conservative amount of 20% of that number.
From what I can find, and to be fair, it's hard to get a definitive answer, but from the evidence available, it seems like the real number is between 5 and 10%, not 20%. That 20% number comes from the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commissioner back in 2022, but FOI documents that were released as people investigated his claims don't back up what he was saying. Now, obviously, 5 to 10% is still too high. We should absolutely try and crack down on all possible fraud we can find, but it's interesting that much like the people they claim to be exposing, they too are inflating their numbers for their own benefit. Maybe they do have a source for that 20% figure, but they don't show it. Most of what they do in this video is either a vibe check or an AI Google summary or ChatGPT summary.
Takes a few minutes. Now, for all the people that don't know what an ABN is,
I think it's like 56.
and imagine how many people think about it.
And they claim this is a rampant issue and so many fraudsters are being allowed to get away with it.
So why is it taking people like us to actually look into this? Like mainstream media doesn't look into it. There's only a certain amount of actual prosecutions that have happened. And do you know the amount?
16 prosecutions out of 7,000 tip-offs. 16.
But the reality is, Australia's been investigating NDIS fraud at a greater rate since 2022, with the Fraud Fusion Task Force disrupting more than 2,000 providers submitting incorrect or non-compliant claims. And as of December 2025, 39 people across 27 investigations have been recommended to be put before the courts, with 19 of them currently before the courts. You can still think that's nowhere near enough, but in their 2026 expose, they don't even cite the most up-to-date numbers, and given so many other inaccuracies in this video, you start to wonder why they did that, and if it was to fearmonger more. They also don't properly explain to you how the NDIS works and use that lack of knowledge seemingly to make you think things are more potentially suspicious or fraudulent than they actually are. They talk about one NDIS business for every 13 residents in Lakemba, or the fact that only 6% of businesses are officially registered with the NDIS.
That means 1 in 13 people are currently running one.
Currently, registered providers are only 6% of the total.
But if you actually understand how the NDIS operates, that's not necessarily suspicious or indicative of fraud. If you're eligible for NDIS, you get 3 options. It can either be self-managed, you handle everything on your own, you can use a plan manager, you're paying for someone to assist you in managing the things you need, or it can be agency managed. That's where you use the National Disability Insurance Agency. The core difference between those 3 being that if you're self-managed or plan managed, you can use whatever service you want as long as it's part of a goal in your NDIS plan. But if you're agency managed, you can only use a registered NDIS business. When you realize that only 8% of NDIS participants are agency managed, 63% are plan managed, and 29% are self-managed, it really starts to make sense why so few businesses would want to be NDIS registered, because then they have to deal with a price cap. And 92% of NDIS participants are able to pay above what the NDIS cap would be. You can take issue with how the system is currently working, but it's not necessarily fraudulent or suspicious. If anything, it's a pretty normal market reaction to goods and services being required and independent businesses having the ability to make more money. It then also makes sense why you would have so many NDIS registered businesses clumped together, particularly in lower socioeconomic areas where people are going to be more reliant on a local area coordinator or a plan manager to direct them to known and local registered NDIS businesses that are going to be cheaper. Again, you can take issue with how any part of that system works, but none of that is inherently suspicious or fraudulent, and it doesn't seem like Pete or Drew understand how the system actually works. So obviously, they're not able to provide genuine solutions that might make things better. So many statements in this video are just throwaway lines that don't really make sense if you think about them for more than 10 seconds. I don't mean to be pedantic, but come on.
So they're giving $52 billion to every NDIS provider.
Obviously they don't, and obviously he just misspoke, and it's whatever, but catch that in the edit. This is meant to be your NDIS expose magnum opus, and you're just saying stuff. The filler statements aren't even correct. I also like how that clip ends with him making it not about NDIS participants, but everyone else instead.
And if our funds, the tax-paying dollars, aren't being used correctly and are being misused, then how does that make any sense? And how is that fair to every single person who pays taxes in this country?
It's really emblematic of what this video actually is, in my opinion.
You know, this is what a lot of people are potentially doing in the NDIS, allegedly anyway, so.
He just has no proof of that. None at all. He is genuinely just vibe checking and saying things. From my understanding, they had to condense 17 hours of footage into this 51 minutes and had to go through 5 different lawyers to check for defamation.
Now, we have been targeted making this video. Originally, we had 17 hours of raw footage. We had to go through 5 different lawyers.
And I wonder if that's actually because they're just bad at doing investigative journalism and presenting information without it being defamatory.
And they don't even have phone numbers connected.
Calling is not available.
Please leave a message and I will get back.
No answer.
I mean, come on. 50% of the examples there disproved his point. One of them didn't seem to be a number, but the other one you just got a voicemail. That inherently means that the number was real. They just didn't pick up. I just feel like they didn't care, man. The background footage they used to show that freedom of speech was being impacted by defamation laws or that it inhibited freedom of the press.
We don't have, for example, the First Amendment that the Americans have.
The man arrested for hate speech
is from a news article about a guy who went on a horrific anti-Semitic rant and broke the hate speech laws.
Sydney's March for Australia rally took a dark turn this afternoon with a man arrested for hate speech after ranting in favour of Nazis and against Australian Jews.
I agree defamation laws are an issue, but what a clip to use. We get 2 alleged real fraud stories in this expose, and for the one we spend most of the video following, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not entirely sure this even constitutes fraud legally. I also noticed when rewatching this section, they've now blurred her face, but only for part of it. I know they got a privacy claim a couple days after posting the video, so maybe they just did it in a specific section to keep monetization or to keep the video up. Given the kid stuff, maybe they just suck with the blur tool. Honestly, who knows? Do I even care anymore? Real quick summary. Tweedledee heads to the US while Tweedledum tries to set up a sting operation to catch some alleged fraudsters in the act. He rents an Airbnb, hires a cleaning service. Keep that in mind, that'll matter later. The cleaners arrive without having the necessary equipment. They do about 25 minutes of work. The job's pretty poor. And then PeteZz gets his content when they send through an invoice, which is 2 hours of labor, even though they were there for 30 minutes, plus charging him for the amount of kilometers they had to drive, with those kilometers apparently inflated.
What? So they put 2 hours for the cleaning, $116.06. Then non-labor costs, $120.
Is it predatory? Maybe. Is it intentional fraud? Well, unfortunately for me, I actually cared enough to try and figure it out, and the answer is not as simple as they would like you to believe. Back in 2022, they were changed to the Social Community Home Care and Disability Services Industry Award, SCHADS. It really rolls off the tongue. That took me so many tries to get right. That's such a long award name. Those changes made it so that a casual or part-time care worker had to be given a minimum working period of 2 hours. Now that doesn't mean these people can charge the NDIS a minimum of 2 hours. What it means is the business or agency hiring people is responsible for making sure in that 2 hour period they are legitimately profitable, because under the industry award, no matter what, they have to get paid for 2 hours. That might sound easy to understand, but I'm gonna be honest, that took me a while to actually figure out exactly how it worked. And there are multiple Facebook threads I was able to find of NDIS workers who are seeking clarification on what they're actually allowed and not allowed to bill for and do. It seems like it is a genuine and common misconception. I'm gonna be honest, I'm still not 100% sure exactly how billing on the NDIS works, but on its face value, it doesn't actually seem unreasonable that would be a minimum engagement period or call-out fee. I'd argue the best thing we could do to actually reduce fraud is to make the guidelines crystal clear and easier to access, because I would not be surprised if a lot of the fraud being caught is genuine administrative error. Here's how I think it's meant to work. If you were self-managed or plan-managed and you accessed an external non-registered NDIS business that had a minimum call-out fee or minimum engagement time, everything there is above board. It is legally billable for 2 hours. But if you were using a registered NDIS provider, they actually have to be doing a job for 2 hours to bill for 2 hours. They can at most claim a late cancellation or travel fee, but that's capped under a certain limit because of the NDIS's capped prices for registered businesses. In this particular case, it does not seem like charging for 2 hours was appropriate, but from what I can understand, and I want to be super clear, I am far away from being a lawyer. I don't know that much about the law. I don't think this would actually meet the definition of what fraud legally is. To my knowledge, there has to be either genuine intent or recklessness. And from all of the available evidence in this video, I don't think she would meet either of those. On the phone call when he's attempting to organize the booking, she's very upfront and direct about the 2 hour minimum, and she isn't particularly confident in it either. It's relatively tentative.
I think for NDIS, minimum 2 hours.
So that's on the NDIS rules.
Yeah, that's the rules, minimum 2 hours.
For cleaning, it needs to be minimum 2 hours.
She also claims that one of the reasons she believes in that minimum is she got external advice when they were doing an audit. And in my opinion, I think it's entirely believable that she has earnestly and genuinely misunderstood an NDIS minimum for the SCHADS minimum she's meant to pay her workers.
It's 2 hours that we should be invoicing for cleaning.
Yeah.
Did the NDIS tell you that minimum?
Not NDIS, but where we got our NDIS, the audit from, they said one of them that minimum is 2 hours, but he said a lot of providers do that.
She's very upfront with what the workers actually did. She immediately tells them they were only there for half an hour.
Said about 30 minutes.
Oh, it took about 30 minutes, okay. So
But NDIS rule is for cleaning, it needs to be minimum 2 hours.
Is that why it's invoiced for 2 hours?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not because it took them 2 hours.
And overall, she seems genuinely confused when they bring it up. She clarifies that the reason her workers didn't bring their own equipment is because they're actually not cleaners, they're support workers. And there is a meaningful difference there, but it doesn't seem like Drew or Pete understand that.
Because everywhere we provide the service, usually they have all the cleaning products.
Well,
this is not a cleaning, this is NDIS, right? It's not a cleaning business, so
Yeah.
we don't provide.
Now look, you can take issue with any particular part of this. You can argue that she should have known about the minimum and it's her responsibility and it's not anyone else's fault but hers that NDIS participants are being unfairly billed, that the workers should always have spare equipment on hand, that there was no justification to inflating the drive it took for her workers to get there, or the fact that they did a poor job overall. You can make any of those arguments, but they don't. I am, and based on all of the available evidence, I don't think there is enough evidence to suggest that this woman is intentionally or even negligently committing fraud. No alternative perspectives seem to have ever been considered. They seem to know nothing about the SCHADS, and overall, this interview is more designed as an ambush because, in my opinion, they wanted content and they needed a face to their fraud. This is not journalism, it's rage bait. And if any of the businesses or individuals present in this video get found out for allegedly committing fraud or anything like that, Drew and Pete deserve no credit. It would truly be a moment of a broken clock is right twice a day. What a monumental waste of time this video was, and in my opinion, a gross display of negligence by two people who are not remotely responsible or intelligent enough to touch this topic with a 10-foot pole. I didn't have much hope when I heard this video was being made, but somehow we still did not reach my bare minimum expectation that we don't put children in a vulnerable position for content. I don't know Drew or Pete beyond what I've seen online, but I'm gonna be honest, from what I've seen, they seem like they just suck, that they're not cool people, that in my opinion, they just want attention. From what I can gather, viewers who already believe in this grand NDIS conspiracy really liked this piece of content because it just validated everything they already believed, and anyone who actually knows about the NDIS probably doesn't care enough to watch this video because why would they trust these two? I doubt many people who are ardent defenders of them are going to be convinced of anything I have said, but I am always hopeful that at least one person is going to watch one of my correction videos, hear a family member or friend or coworker say something wild, and have the knowledge and ability to go, actually, nah man, they're full of it, and it's the end of it. If I'm right and the definition of fraud is intentionally or recklessly dishonestly obtaining a benefit or causing a loss by deception or other means, I would say that Drew and Pete have successfully defrauded me of my time and my brain cells. As always, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. It's been real, and this is miserable.